name is Clayton Richards. I'm going to be presenting my findings on my action research plan that I've been doing over the course of my master's studies. I'm going to be presenting that to you guys today. Before I get started, I just want to go ahead and present the people that we've already got. Joining us today, we've got Miss Cinnamon Earhart, who is an ESL teacher in my department. She serves the Odenville feeder patterns, excuse me. And she is awesome. I'm so thankful to have her here today. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Miss Earhart. Also with Miss Earhart, we have Miss Veronica. Miss Veronica is our, hey, Miss Wallace. Miss Wallace is jumping on too. Miss Veronica, she works with Cinnamon in the Odenville feeder pattern. So she is one of our wonderful bilingual aides, and she does so much to serve the ESL department. So thank you for being here. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Veronica. We've also got Miss Adrienne Ward, who is our phenomenal lead ESL teacher for the county. She has been such a role model, like in my practice and in my career, and she's given me so much good feedback throughout this my studies and my research. So thank you, Adrian, and thank you to you too, Cinnamon, because without you guys, I feel like there were times when this research really could have gotten stuck. So thank you guys for being here. I've also got Miss Robinson here. Miss Robinson is our library media specialist at Moody Intermediate School, where our research study was conducted. Miss Robinson does a ton for our EL kids. She is always looking at like new technology resources to push into classrooms. She's always looking for more books and dual language readers and multi-language books. So she's always keeping our English learners in mind. So thank you so much, Miss Robinson. We've also got Miss Ashley Thompson here. Miss Ashley Thompson is one of our phenomenal fifth grade teachers at the intermediate school. She does a wonderful, wonderful job, and she has worked with a ton of my ELs over the years, and I'm just really grateful for what she does for my kids and to have her here in my presentation today. We have also got Miss Abra Wallace, our math coach at Moody Intermediate School. Hey, Miss Wallace. Miss Wallace
Hi,
and
hi.
I moved classrooms this year, and I moved right across the hallway from Miss Wallace, and we've always gotten along, but this year, Miss Wallace, I found one of my people across the hallway, and
Thanks.
she does so much for math and numeracy on our campus. I can't ever, thank you enough for what you do for our campus, and thank you for being here with us today too, to listen to me ramble a little bit, I guess. So, um, but yeah, thank you guys all so much for being here. Hopefully, we'll have some more popping on here shortly. And if they are, we'll just go as we get them on. But now I'm ready to get started if you guys are. So thank you guys for being here today. I'm presenting the findings of my action research. The title of my action research plan was the effects of the gamification of language instruction on the demonstrated speaking confidence of English learners. So kind of a mouthful, but I'm hoping I can break that down for everybody today. All right. So getting started in the fall of 2024, when I was starting to think about what I wanted my action research to be, I started looking at data for English learners on campus, and I started having conversations with classroom teachers on campus, with administrators, with our coaches, with our English learning students. And a word that I kept coming to and hearing over and over was confidence. I kept hearing there's a lack of confidence when our kids are speaking English. They don't feel self-assured. They don't feel confident enough to speak in class. And so, knowing what I did about language acquisition, because in my undergraduate, I said second language acquisition, knowing what I know about that, knowing what I know about the affective filter, which I'm going to explain a little bit more here momentarily, what I know about all of that stuff, I started to think if our teachers, me included, were doing something to better target the affective filter of our English learners, could we improve confidence? Because self-efficacy and confidence and anxiety, all of these things are impeding factors that can postpone strong second language acquisition. So I started thinking about how can we better do that? And at the time, I was reading a lot about gamification, gamified instruction, and I started wondering, could we use gamified language instruction as a way to boost speaking confidence in our English learners at Moody Intermediate School, which led me to form the research question and the hypothesis that you see on your screen now. All right. The purpose of this study is to introduce gamified instruction, see if there is any correlation between a rise in speaking confidence and gamified language instruction, and hopefully boost more confidence in both social and academic settings for our English learners. Um, Lastly, the rationale for this study, it felt really self-explanatory to me. If our kids have more confidence, if our English learners feel more confident when speaking in the second language, they will have more self-advocacy skills, more self-efficacy. All of these things are going to grow when they feel stronger and more comfortable speaking in that second language. And hopefully we see improvement in their academic achievement too, as they're able to communicate in the gen ed classroom better. All right. So I'm going to set the context and demographics really quickly. You can look on our screen here and see where the study took place at. The study took place at Moody Intermediate School. In the school year 24-25, we were still Moody Middle School. You'll hear me maybe switch back and forth some during this presentation. I have included Moody Middle School in all of my writing, but we are now Moody Intermediate School. So I just wanted everyone to know that. We currently serve grades 4, 6, but in the future we will be serving grades 3, 5. All right, I kind of want to zoom in and look at the demographics of the population that was actually impacted by this study. The impacted population at this study were English learners at Moody Middle School for the 24-25 school year. We had 32 total students that took part in this study. There were 16 boys and 16 girls. We saw various languages, including Spanish, Portuguese, Central American languages like Canjoal. We saw Tagalog. Lots of diversity on our campus. So something else I think is also important to mention is that there was some variance in educational background that the kids had before they got here, right? So some of our students are SLIFE, students with limited interrupted formal education, but then we also have some English learners that come to us, and truly the language barrier is one of the only real challenges that they're facing in class because they have had a proper formal education in their home country. So both of those populations exist on our campus. That was, something that just for everyone to be aware of what the demographics we're working with are. Um, Connections to the literature. Building my literature review was probably my favorite part of this whole process. I spent several months kind of just digging into the literature, learning more about second language acquisition, learning more about gamification. And I feel like it set a strong foundation for my study, but what it also did was it kind of allowed me to grow and blossom into different intellectual directions that I'd like to go in after this study is over. I'm going to speak about some of those more in a moment, but first I'd just like to briefly kind of share with you guys some of the things that I looked at when I was completing my literature review, or my connections to the literature. The first thing I looked at was the history and the evolution of second language acquisition, how that moves, what are some of the important beats of that history. Obviously, we started with behavioralism and structuralism in the early 20th century. That moves in the mid 20th century to Noam Chomsky's theory of universal grammar. That pretty quickly turns into, or not turns into, but influences error analysis, which is really where modern language instruction kind of blossoms from. Error analysis was a theory and methodology introduced in the late 60s and early 70s. And basically, it told second language instructors and theorists and researchers that errors in the second language are not really errors. They tell us something about what's happening to the language learner when they're learning that new language. They reveal something to us about the learner, and anything that reveals a truth to us, it's really not fair to call an error, right? So that whole sort of train of thought was born from error analysis. Error analysis would eventually lead in the 1980s to Krashen's theories of second language acquisition. Stephen Krashen, Cinnamon, and Adrian, I'm sure you guys are probably jumping for joy right now too, but Mr. Dr. Krashen is a personal hero of mine. Um, he explains a lot of what we do in the second language classroom in our current context. He explains a lot of that really well. Something that he also speaks about is comprehensible input, the need for comprehensible input, the need to make instruction comprehensible to the one that is acquiring the new language. And he tells us as second language teachers how we can do that, right? So we looked at that. I also looked at the historical context and evolution of gamification. There's not as much of an explicit history with gamification, but what we do know and what we can see that gamification is just adding gamified elements to instruction and participation in class. Krashen also really expanded on what we know about the affective filter, as I mentioned earlier. The affective filter contains psychological factors that impede language acquisition. And Krashen gives us ways that we can combat all of those things that might keep our students from acquiring a second language more thoroughly or more quickly. I also looked at, because gamification and technology are so tightly bound together, I did look at some thoughts on where technology integration is going in the second language classroom. And that led me to really considering and looking at AI in the foreign language classroom too. At the end of the presentation, I'm going to mention briefly where I'm at in my thinking and where my research has brought me to. But just two questions I'd like to pose to you guys, and also let you know that were questions that came to me as I was researching, were how do we attend to the affective filter through increased comfort and a sense of fun in the second language classroom? And then what is the role or the purpose of the second language instructor in the age of AI? I'd like to expand on both of those later on, but as we start, I'd just kind of like to go ahead and set that for you guys. Briefly, I'd like to describe the method and study design that I used for my action research plan. Action research is just a continuous cycle of evidence-based research and application of problem-solving strategies into an organization. It is a cycle of observing the application, collecting data, analyzing data, and then returning to the field with the conclusions you've drawn from that first cycle. All right. I used a mixed method design, so I used some qualitative and qualitative data for this research. It felt most appropriate for kind of what I was trying to get at. I studied I collected some student responses from interviews, from panel discussions. I also performed some field observations inside of gen ed classrooms, and teachers and students rated sense of speaking confidence on a 5-point scale. Just a little note about the ethics of the research: all administrators were notified prior to beginning the study. In the fall of 24, I used that fall semester to complete my research, complete my proposal. And then in the spring of 25, I actually performed my action research. You can look here on your screen and see a timeline of some things that I did when I spoke to students, when I spoke to teachers, when I began implementing some of these strategies. You'll also notice, you'll see some things on your screen related to social and emotional learning. I felt like that was important because I feel like there is a metacognitive aspect to social and emotional learning that felt like it was relevant, that I needed to introduce to my kids if I was going to ask them to think metacognitively about their own confidence and their own state of emotions when they're learning. These are the results on your screen of the results that I collected from both the pre-surveys from teachers and students. You can see on that 5-point scale how teachers rated perceived confidence in social language, academic language related to reading, and academic language related to math. You'll also see how students rated themselves. Um, Scores, there was not a lot of discrepancy in scores. It is interesting to note that students typically rated themselves a little higher than their teachers did. I don't know what all the implications of that are, but I would like to mention that to you guys for you to also consider the implications. At the end of the study, finally, we have arrived at the big finding. I wish I could tell you that there was some huge breakthrough and I discovered that, oh my gosh, if you just implement gamified instruction, that solves speaking acquisition. No such luck, unfortunately. We did see minor increases. The largest increases that we saw, according to teacher responses, were in social language, which makes more sense to me based on the type of activities we did in class. Students actually reported that they experienced the most or the largest increase of speaking confidence in language related to academic reading. Um, I tend to lean closer to what teachers reported, that social language what experienced the biggest growth during this time. But I did also think it was interesting to note that yeah, the students felt that an academic area grew more. And again, I do really want to draw your attention to, even when there were increases, these increases were really, really minimal. I'm going to break down some reasons that I think for that here in a moment, but I did just want you to be aware of that. And these are some things, some student responses that I summarized during interviews and panel discussions, just some things they thought about gamified instruction. They typically like it. They like that it feels fun. They like that it doesn't feel like traditional school. And something that I did find interesting was that they found or they expressed an enjoyment when they didn't feel like the activity was directly related to grading or formal learning. I think that's just very relevant. Conclusions and implications. So this is where I kind of like to break down what I think about what I found. Um, Based on the results, there may be a slight correlation between the introduction of gamified instruction, social and emotional learning, and an increase in speaking confidence in the L2. However, increases were so slight that it's hard to, for me at least, to determine if really gamified instruction was the cause or at least the only cause of that increase. Uh, it's kind of the nature of the beast, but just due to the infrastructure of the ESL program in this county, it's difficult to really deliver sustained presence with English learners at the various locations that English teacher or EL teachers serve. So I do think that there might be, if I were able to deliver more sustained interventions, there might be more cause to see more correlation. Currently, though, I'm not prepared to say that. Also, I think that something I could have done better at the beginning of this process was define speaking confidence in the second language. I think I had in my mind a really clear image of what confidence looks like when speaking your second language. However, I did not really I didn't flesh that out before starting, and I think the effects of that were noticed in my study. Like I've mentioned already, students reported a little bit higher confidence than teachers reported observing. Classroom teachers, based on these results, they may wish to begin to introduce more gamified instruction and social and emotional learning into their classrooms. This is the part I'm really excited for. Where are we going from here? What did these findings and these research tell us about where we can go from here? So some things that I do wonder, can this confidence, if there really is a correlation between gamified instruction and speaking confidence, is this confidence similar to how motivation, some research has found, can be transferable between different domains? Could this confidence also be transferable between different domains? A larger thing I'm kind of thinking about too, it's a little esoteric, a little theoretic, I guess. Adrian and Cinnamon, this may be more on you guys' wavelength, but this is, I'm really thinking deeply about what input looks like coming all around us these days. What are the different types of language inputs that our students are getting in their environments, in their classrooms? And is it comprehensible? Is that social language comprehensible? Is that digital language comprehensible? Is that academic language comprehensible? And what does AI mean in all of this? How do teachers fit into second language teaching in an age where AI can do a lot of the things, and quite well, that we are also trained to do in the classroom? What does this mean for us? What does it mean for bilingualism? And lastly, I would just kind of like to speak a little bit about what this project has meant for me. Over the past a little over a year that I've been engaged in my action research, I have discovered that I love academic research and academic writing. I love the research process. I love talking to teachers and engaging with data and identifying trends on my campus, and then looking for research and evidence-based methods that can address those problems on my campus. That's a really deep passion I felt ignited in myself. And lastly, I think this research, more than anything, has changed the way I think about language. It's changed the way that I contextualize language inside of my practice. It's changed the way that I contextualize language acquisition and how I understand it in the development process, how I understand language acquisition in 2025, when most of the language input they get comes from the timeline, comes from the For You page, comes from the feed. What does that what does that mean for us now? Those are things I'm really excited to continue to pursue. And yeah, that is pretty much the gist of my action research and my findings. Briefly, I'd like to give you guys just a quick moment. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I'd like to give you a moment if you have any questions or comments, anything that you would like to add or ask at this time.
Hey, Clayton. So first off, I think you did a great job on your presentation. And we've
Thank
talked a
you.
little
Thank you so
bit.
much.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think I probably had more context on it than maybe some other folks in here, just because we've
Right.
talked about it a little bit.
Right. Sure.
But I just wanted to share, I I like you wonder what all of our more modern day input is going to do to second language acquisition when I consider how many people that are native English speakers that don't necessarily know what some of these phrases, I hate to do this, but like 6, 7,
Right.
like,
Exactly. Exactly.
there's been so much discussion about what does that even mean,
Right.
and,
Right.
you have, social media influencers now that their entire identity is I'm going to teach you what middle school slang means.
Yes. Yep.
Mr. Lindsay, I don't know if y'all have followed Mr. Lindsay at all, but that is like his whole thing. I'm going to explain to you what this actually means.
Yep.
So I don't guess I really have a question, but I will say that it is very interesting to think about
Right.
what does that mean for second language acquisition when we
Yes.
don't even really know what some of these things mean in our
For
first
first
language, in
language
our first
acquisition. Yes,
language.
yes.
Um,
Well, I'm totally on the same wavelength with you, Cinnamon, because it's what do we know? As second language specialist, what do we know about input? We know that when input is internalized, it's later integrated and externalized, right? And so to me, I think the big question I'm asking myself these days is, if this is the type of input that all of our kids, regardless of if they're EL or not, if this is the type of input that all of our kids are taking in, what are they going to start externalizing? What are they already externalizing? You know, or are we seeing like the, I guess the cultural consequence of sort of incomprehensible input? Maybe, you know, if comprehensible input leads to comprehensible output, I think a lot would agree that a lot of the output we get these days feels really incomprehensible, and maybe there is something to that, that you know, the output, the externalization is incomprehensible because the input, the language that these kids receive, it's incomprehensible, it's disordered, it's disorganized, it's dysregulated. Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to that, but I'm totally on the same wavelength. I totally agree 100%. Yeah, well, thank you, Cinnamon. If there's any other comments or questions before we wrap up, I want to give it just a few more seconds for anybody else to share anything. All right. Thank you, Sadie. Yeah, Miss Robinson said great info. Thank you. Thank you, Miss Robinson. I do appreciate it. All right. If you are interested, I know you guys are just dying for further reading on these topics. So I did include some references. Please feel free to peruse those. I have also included the student and teacher surveys in the appendix that I use to collect student responses. Lastly, really briefly, I did just want to touch on the Alabama instructional leadership standards. I do feel like I've mastered throughout this process. You can see those on your screen. I won't break those down in too much detail for you, but basically these are related to mission and vision, curriculum and instruction, and professional improvement of the self and of colleagues. And I really feel like all of those were addressed throughout this process. So yeah. And the last thing I'm going to do for you guys, thank you, Adrian. I do appreciate that. Adrian said, wonderful job. Thank you, my friend. I do appreciate it. I've got a link and a code for you guys. You guys have also got that on your summary that I emailed to you guys earlier. So that code is on your summary if it's easier for you to use there, whatever is easiest for you guys. But I do just ask that you give me some feedback on my, thank you, Miss Wallace. I appreciate it so much. Thank you. Yeah, if you guys can give me some feedback. Thank you, Miss Thompson. I appreciate it. You guys are the best. I do. I love you guys. I'm very blessed to be at this school, to be in this county, to be in this department. Thank you all very much. Well, yeah, that's all I've got for you guys. I'm going to cut the recording now. Let's see if I do it right. All right, I'm about to stop the recording. So thank you all. Thank you.
That link for your survey